Okay, welcome. This is our first session of Overcome Anxiety with Intention Tapping. And this is group one, so it's 9 o'clock in the morning here in Perth. And I know we have people from Canada, from the USA, from Italy, and from all over Australia who are joining us. An hour and a few minutes. I'm going to stay a little bit longer than that. Feel free to stay if you can. If not, you can pick it up on the replay. I'm going to give you as much as I can in the time that we have on how you can use intention tapping and other effective techniques to overcome anxiety. But first, we've got to get the disclaimers and all that necessary legal stuff out of the way. So this is for education and information. It's not medical advice. We're going to focus on the common anxiety that most people experience. So this is worry. You might worry too much, have anxiety over your performance that might affect your performance, exams and tests, those kind of things, anxiety over making decisions, and anxiety that maybe stops you from taking action in your life. And while what we cover might be helpful for people who are suffering from anxiety disorders and more complex conditions, if you experience those conditions, you really need to work with a mental health professional, and you should discuss with them your use of any of these techniques. This stuff will probably be helpful within your program, but you really need to get that cleared up with your mental health professional. And of course, if you are joining, participating, or watching this program, you have to acknowledge that some of the techniques I'm going to use must still be considered experimental. Therefore, there's no guaranteed outcome for any particular user, and just because they work for a lot of other people doesn't mean they're going to work for you in exactly that way. And therefore, you have to take full responsibility for your own mental, emotional, and physical health and your use of any of the techniques that I use, discuss, or teach, or demonstrate in this program. Okay, quick housekeeping. Of course, it's being recorded. If you participate, then you give participation for your you give permission for your participation to be recorded. That's only really, like, for most of you, it's just your chat messages and stuff like that. So, your name might be called out, or what you wrote may be called out. Obviously, if you want to be totally confidential, then you need to log out and then log in with a different name. I'm going to take some live questions via the chat, and I'm also going to coach some volunteers. So if you do volunteer, then obviously you've already given permission for that to be recorded and used and seen by other people. Join in, participate actively. This is a 4-part program, and there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions as we go. Hopefully keep those to the times when I say, questions now, but please do ask questions, because it's an opportunity to find some things out and take the opportunity to join in and be coached. And if you know how to tap already, then you can start tapping right now. Once you know how to tap, then you can tap along and borrow benefits when people are working with me. Okay, so this is what we're aiming for in this program. And I'm down here now. Okay. Actually, no, I'm going to leave myself up here. Sorry, it's a little bit distracting there. I want to teach you some strategies and techniques to help you to manage, control, and overcome anxiety. And if you have like me, you have a problem with anxiety, which is more than just one thing, then these are the kind of steps that you might need to go through. First, you need to learn some strategies to, relieve the anxiety that you have, help you to manage it better, help you to get more control over it, and ultimately your goal is to overcome it. And so I want to achieve, also empower you to be able to achieve your goals and help you to improve your performance in areas where anxiety may be holding you back, and help you to live a life which is more expansive. Because one thing that anxiety does is it kind of closes your life down. It makes your life very constricted and contracted. And my aim, my fond wish, is for you to be able to live your life based on your values without anxiety holding you back from that. Okay, so very quickly, we're going to aim to cover all these things. It may seem like, we're doing 4 sessions of 4 hours, but an hour goes by very, very quickly. So we're going to start today with what is anxiety and what causes it. I'm going to give you over this time a range of different approaches to managing anxiety. Although I called this Overcome Anxiety with Intention Tapping, I'm also going to bring in some of the other proven evidence-based approaches that you can also combine with tapping, because there are plenty of things that work with anxiety, and sometimes you need a combination approach. So I want to give you as much of that I can fit into this program. And we'll also use the simple energy techniques, the tapping approach developed by myself and Dr. David Lake, And we'll also use the intention tapping, which you know, is a process which incorporates tapping. It could be used without tapping as well, but it incorporates tapping. When it does, I call it intention tapping. And then we'll look at ways to overcome your avoidance and get you into action. And that actually will mean going a little bit deeper and applying the techniques to your beliefs, your values, and your goals. Okay, so what is this thing called anxiety? Just get out of the way of that poor little child there and bring myself down a little bit lower here. Essentially, it's an uncomfortable feeling state. And yes, there are thoughts and that go along with this, but the unpleasant bodily feelings are actually the biggest part for most people. It's also linked to worry about the future. Your body is reacting as if it's responding to a threat, even though the threat may not actually be present. Now, this is one of the things, as I'll say, that's big difference between fear and anxiety, is that with anxiety, the threat isn't necessarily there, or you don't know that it's there. And so it's actually something that is being created or that is being triggered. And what's happening is that your primitive alarm system is being activated, which stimulates your fight-flight reflex. In fact, there's a fight, flight, and freeze reflex that they talk about being stimulated, which happens when you have a real threat. You know, you get ready to either to freeze, to play dead, or to, you know, not be seen, or you get ready to fight the threat, or you get ready to flee the threat. And, you know, that happens in a real situation where there is a real threat. It also happens with anxiety. It can be something that the threat is actually being created in your mind and your body is responding as if the threat is really here. And it's horrible. Look, I've had anxiety my whole life, and, you know, I'll give you a lot of examples during this program of you know, how that really held me back. So you can have body feelings and reactions, you know, ranging from butterflies, which is very common when people get up to perform or when they get up to speak, for example, tightness in the stomach, tightness in the chest, through to dizziness, nausea, or full-blown panic. You know, I never forgot, you know, when I was 18 years old, I woke up, I actually had a cold, but I woke up not being able to breathe. And then I started to panic, and it got worse. I started shaking uncontrollably and all this kind of stuff. And I remember my dad rushing me to the hospital in the middle of the night, going through red traffic lights. And when I got there in the hospital, they obviously took one look at me and knew that it was just a panic attack. But I wish they'd told me that and not let me lie there for 3 hours before they told me that, because of course they had people who had real emergencies to deal with, and they knew that my situation wasn't a real emergency. And so by the time someone spoke to me about it, it was like, wow, okay, I wish you kind of had told me this earlier. It was an awful, awful experience. Since then, I had panic attacks, and actually on reflection, when I was a kid, I used to have, you know, what they call fits, you know, where I remember fainting, for example, in class, you know, and all this kind of stuff. This was also anxiety in retrospect. In retrospect, I understand it as anxiety. So I've suffered anxiety. I've suffered anxiety in speaking, where I've got up and literally been shaking, where my voice has been, you know, gone off, where I've actually had full-blown panic attacks. I know some of the feelings of severe anxiety. Okay, so what is causing anxiety? Okay, well, ultimately, it may be the result of past negative experiences that we've had, where we learn to link a threat to various situations. So when we get in those situations now, it triggers memories of those past experiences. But also our brain is kind of encoded like, okay, you know, when something bad happens, it kind of stores that away as like, okay, anything that looks like this in future, I'm going to give you a bit of a warning in terms of a shot of adrenaline or whatever, so that you can escape this, so that it doesn't happen again. So we can learn to link threats to various situations from having real things happen to us, which are negative experiences. We can also create anxiety by projecting scenarios in our mind and reacting to them as if they are real, because our you know, your nervous system can't tell a difference between something that's real and something that you really vividly imagine. Okay, so what's happening with anxiety is that we're either imagining those future problems as if they're real and experiencing them as if they're actually happening now, or we are, in terms of getting the feeling, re-accessing the emotion, energy, and pain of previous problems and linking that to the situation we're in now, or projecting them into the future. We can even be projecting them into the near future because we're like, okay, something's about to happen, and we're actually, if you like, experiencing it before it happens. I remember years ago they had a big cyclone in Australia was coming up in Queensland, and they went into this town and they're interviewing people, and that, of course, this is what they do. They come in and they say, how do you feel about the fact the cyclone is coming to your home tomorrow? And I remember seeing this lady, and she's just looking over into the distance, and she's just aghast, and she's bawling her eyes out, and she's like, and then she describes the scene that she's seeing in her mind. She says, I can just see everything that I own just being blown away. And I turned to my wife and I said, she's actually experiencing the cyclone a day early. And she's actually created an image in her mind as if it's happening now, and she's responding to it as if it's happening. This is actually what your mind will do. Your mind will project possible negative things that will happen. But in this lady's case, she had gone into this image and she was experiencing it as if it's real. And if you open up her nervous system, you would see her nervous system responding as if the threat was really happening right now. And you would see depletion of her immune system and all this negative stress chemistry in her body as if she was actually in the middle of the cyclone. And here's the thing, it didn't actually happen. The cyclone didn't actually hit where she lived. So she didn't have to go through that at all. But tell that to her nervous system because she experienced it the day before as if it was actually happening, as if it was already happening. So as I mentioned, your brain and your nervous system can't tell the difference between something you vividly imagine and something you actually experience. And this is a bummer, actually. Well, it's a good thing in a sense because you can visualize success and you can get the feeling of success and you can move towards success. And this is stuff that I've done with athletes and help and high performers and help them to achieve. But by the same token, you can imagine doom and gloom happening. And this is what happens with anxiety, is that you get into this this process where you are imagining bad stuff happening all the time, and you are having those things create problems in your nervous system as if it's real. Okay, so the problem with anxiety is that it causes you to suffer. You suffer it. It's a horrible thing. It's something that you want, you would do anything to shut off. Sometimes the suffering is really bad. It just happened, funnily enough, in Australia here last night, there was a program on Insight on anxiety, and they had all these people. They were just basically all sitting in a room talking about their anxiety problems and what it caused them, and how they had gone with getting it treated. And there was a little bit of a debate about different treatments and all this kind of stuff. Just happened to be on last night, which is interesting, before the program I'm going to start running today. And so Deb's saying, yeah, wasn't it great? It was great. It's a shame they didn't have tapping on there, but it was good. It was really, really interesting. And so some of those people, they had, for example, they'd had a panic attack and they thought they were going to die. And this is what happens. You can have a panic attack spontaneously. You can be a normally well person and everything's going really well. And then suddenly this panic comes seemingly out of nowhere. And now, oh my gosh. And the problem is once it's come once, and then you can get fearful of it coming again. And so you start to get more anxious and more worried, and you start to suffer. So the biggest things anxiety causes is just makes you suffer. It also causes you to start avoiding situations where anxiety might happen. And therefore it actually contracts your life. There's also contraction happening in your body, by the way. And that's what we want to learn to treat with techniques like tapping. So ultimately you have unnecessary suffering. You don't enjoy your life as much. You start restricting what you will do, what you can do, and and you won't allow yourselves to do various things. So your life contracts, and you end up not living a life that you really want to live, and therefore you have really unfulfilled potential. And these are the kinds of things that people say about their anxiety. It stops them from enjoying things as much as they should. It stops them from being able to do things that they want. Even when things are good, they're worried that something bad is going to happen. This is the challenge. You don't even get to enjoy the good stuff because you might lose it. I've seen people who have millions and millions and millions of dollars, but they're so fearful of losing it that they can't enjoy it. And that's what anxiety does. And it can be exhausting. It's really, really draining. And it's kind of like, you know, sometimes you're doing like isometric contractions all day long inside your body, and trying to manage this stuff. So big question for you. This is where we start to get a little bit interactive. How does anxiety affect you? What does it cause you to do? What are the things that, you know, what are the symptoms? What's your experience of anxiety? And, you know, I've talked a little bit about my anxiety and where it came up. You know, usually in performance situations, public presentations and that kind of stuff was a real trigger for anxiety for me. Exams, man, when I was at school, I had massive exam anxiety. And, you know, I'm sure that anxiety really didn't help my performance. It certainly made me suffer a great deal when I was at school, you know, the whole thing of having to do exams. In fact, for years after I finished uni, I still had kind of, occasionally I'd just wake up in a cold sweat thinking, you know, that I had an exam to do that day, or that, you know, there was an assignment that was overdue, or something that I needed to have done that I was going to get in trouble for not doing, you know. So this stuff can have lingering consequences. It's so good though to be able to learn tapping, to be able to use tapping to change that stuff. Now, nobody's writing in the chat. I kind of suspected this. You know, I ran a program. Oh, thank you, Cheryl. You're going to have all these people who do this anxiety program, and some of them haven't turned up because they're anxious about coming and doing the program because, of course, you know, that might be exposing. But this isn't a program where you need to be exposing. So, yeah, if you can, just type it in the chat. So thanks. Cheryl says, I emotionally eat and withdraw. Yeah, sometimes get an upset stomach, probably from the, hang on, now you're probably from the crap I'm eating, yes. Obsessive thinking, oh, yeah. You know, it's like the thoughts just keep churning around and around and around, and you can't get rid of them. Deb says, I live a very small life. Yeah, well, hopefully we can help you to expand that a bit, Deb, with this program. Panic attacks nearly every day. So much I want to do, but fear, anxiety, it's the anchor in my life. Yeah, okay, so much better with tapping, but still like a low hum. So hopefully we can actually just take that further for you to improve things. Christine says, subtle underlying anxiety, always running under the surface. I think I keep busy, watch TV, eat. Yeah, this is what we do. Sometimes we avoid things, but we also do other things to distract ourselves, to try and keep our mind focused on that, so that we don't have to deal with the thoughts that come in. Roxana says, muscle tension, short breaths, tics, difficulty speaking. Oh, wow, there's actually more. Good on you all joining in now. Serious tightness in my chest, overeat, cookies, cold hands. Lynn says it affects my sleep, especially when I'm overwhelmed by responsibilities. Elise says unpredictability of seizures keeps me in a hypervigilant state, not trusting my body and feeling safe. So when you say seizures, I presume you're meaning like panic attacks. But if you have seizures, as in, so maybe actually physical seizures like epilepsy or whatever, yeah, you can have anxiety about them potentially happening, and that can be really just rule your life. Understand that. And Cheryl says, I have social anxiety, so it's really limited my life. Spend way too much time alone. Nicola says, I used to have terrible debilitating panic attacks and agoraphobia. Now if I experience anxiety, it's the nighttime anxiety closet opening up. Okay, so yeah, things seem more scary at night. Look, I'll tell you something. For years, I had, you know, I would wake up sometimes and I would be scared of home invasion and all that kind of stuff. And the more you do this, it's like you can scare yourself half to death. Stephen Wright has a thing. He says, what happens if you scare yourself half to death twice? You know, but man, it's not funny when it happens to you. And you know, it's funny because I realized when I was talking to one of my neighbors, and he was always talking about the prospect of home invasion. I thought, well, yeah, he clearly has the same issue. That's something which really has just gone away with tapping. It's such a fantastic thing for me to not have some of those things even come up. Deb says I could ditto every one of the comments that people have made there. Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for being open about your anxiety issues. Part of the thing about anxiety is actually it's is keeping it secret. We don't want people to know that we are anxious. And yet, it's the most common thing in the world. Let me just see if I can actually go to, all right, we'll just have to skip that slide and go to this one. It is so normal to have anxiety. Not just many people experience, I would say most people experience it. You know, I just got this quote from a filmmaker. He says, some of the most talented creative people in the world suffer from anxiety and stage fright. You know, people like Warren Buffett had, you know, one of the richest people, I think he's second richest or the richest person in the world, massive anxiety sufferer. And anxiety disorders are the largest mental health problems worldwide. So just a few statistics on this. Up to 33.7% of the population are affected by an anxiety disorder. In other words, their anxiety is severe enough to be categorized as an anxiety disorder. That's a third of people going to suffer an anxiety disorder, severe anxiety in their lifetime. So this is not just, you know, regular anxiety. 40 million Americans over the age of 18, about 18% of the population over there. Trying to be a little bit inclusive here, but I couldn't include every country. Great Britain, 1 in 6 adults experienced some kind of neurotic health problem in the previous week. Australia, 14% of the population every year experiences an anxiety disorder. Not just anxiety, this is an anxiety, severe enough anxiety. And up to 40% of people are going to experience a panic attack at some time in their life. So, you know, if you start talking about anxiety rather than anxiety disorder, you're talking about something that just about everybody is familiar with. And in the EU, over 60 million people in a year affected by anxiety disorders. So it's normal. It's everybody has it. Just about everybody. Just about everybody has experience. I say just about everybody because, of course, some people don't feel things. You know, the psychopaths don't have anxiety, etc. But most regular people have had some anxiety in their life and are going to have some anxiety in their life. So it is normal, but I'm saying it's not necessary. Anxiety is not real fear. For the most part, it doesn't help you, and it's not dealing with something that's real, that's a real threat in front of you, and it ends up being a waste of energy. So I have a quote, you know, you may have seen this Spurgeon quote, our anxiety does not empty tomorrow of its sorrows, but only empties today of its strength. The problem is, telling you that isn't necessarily going to help you. Let me just see if I can go to the next slide here, because I don't want to go through everything here. I just want to go to 22. Let's see if it will do that for me. Okay. So here's one of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain. You know, he says this later in his life, I'm an old man, I've known a great many troubles, but most of them never happen. So this is the thing about anxiety. We have the belief that these things are going to happen. They seem real, but it actually isn't real and isn't really going to happen. Anne says, I think when you're anxious, you think everyone else in the world is okay and calm and you're the odd one out. Oh yeah, that is so true. And in fact, the problem is a lot of people who look like they're managing really well and they look like they're really confident, underneath, they're not like that at all. And I heard someone just the other day say, you know, I'm like a duck. You know, on the surface, I look calm, but underneath, I'm paddling like crazy. And you think, wow, yeah, okay. So this is the problem with anxiety, is that you can't necessarily see it in someone else. And when you're so preoccupied with yourself and the anxiety that you are suffering, you know, you can't realize that other people are suffering this as well. Let me just, it's not going to let me move on. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, so I have a model for approaches to deal with anxiety. And in fact, I didn't want to go there. I wanted to go here first. Let's go here first. Sorry. First, I want to talk about, you know, what to do with anxiety. And first of all, I want to tell you there's a lot of useless advice out there. And you would have seen it. But, you know, the problem is that you can believe that you should be able to do it, and that can make things worse. So first of all, telling someone not to panic, you know, don't panic, stay calm. Well, how do I stop panicking and how do I stay calm? You know, there's a video online which has had millions of viewers, which is the Stop It video. You can go online, yeah, it's really funny, but you know what? It's actually not helpful because it continues the advice that you should be able to just stop it. You know, just telling me that anxiety is useless and anxiety isn't going to change anything doesn't actually help me. It's really useless advice. If you want something which is a little bit more useful, then yeah, okay, tell me that I can go ahead and do it despite my anxiety. You know, up until tapping and other techniques that are, you know, some of the more modern techniques for managing anxiety, the number one strategy for managing anxiety was basically feel the fear and do it anyway. You can go ahead despite anxiety and do things, even with what seems like crippling anxiety. It doesn't force you to behave in a certain way. It only seems like it does. So most people actually try exposure. You know, they try and force themselves. They try and push against the feelings and the thoughts and go ahead and do it anyway. Usually, if you have really severe anxiety, you're going to need some support to be able to do that. But the fact is, it actually does work for most people. It doesn't work for everybody. You know, I heard about a guy who had 400 combat. He actually had 400 parachute jumps, and he was just as terrified on the 400th one as he was on the ones before that. So exposure doesn't always reduce anxiety. And the problem with exposure as a treatment is that even after doing it 100 times, you usually still feel some anxiety. And, the anxiety you still feel is still quite intense and uncomfortable. There's a guy who I saw, he does, I was part of a professional speaking association, and a lot of people in there, they feel anxiety before every presentation, and they do presentations every day. I've seen people who do presentations, regularly present to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people, and yet they are still in a cold sweat, and some of them are actually vomiting before their presentation. There are AFL, Australian rules football players, there are international soccer players who are so anxious that they vomit before every game. To me, this is a tragedy. You know, I mean, it's a triumph really for them to push through their anxiety. And it just shows that you can be terribly anxious and you still can go ahead and you can do it despite the fear. But I'm hoping that I can help you to do better than that. Number one, don't wait for anxiety to go away to move forward is going to be the message of this program. But also, you can actually get over it. Anxiety can be overcome. You can overcome it. You can learn to manage it. You can learn to relieve it, and you can even completely overcome it. Although this is, for those of you who have more severe anxiety, it's going to take a number of steps to go through, and tapping is going to be part of that and may not be the only part. So your first step is to learn how to relieve it, then you learn how to manage it. As you learn to manage your anxiety, you start to become aware of the triggers and aspects that you then need to do more treatment on in order to overcome it fully, because most problems have more than one aspect. There's more than one thing triggering them. In the tapping world, there's this common thing that if you go and find the one triggering event, then you can release that and it will all get better. Well, that didn't happen for me with my anxiety. What happened for me with my anxiety was that I got over some parts of things that were triggering my anxiety, and some things, I got relief on, but other things still triggered anxiety no matter how much I seemed to do this. And ultimately I had to learn to get enough tapping on a regular basis into my system to the point where my set point for anxiety moved down. And so, I know that's it's kind of, I call it emotional fitness. Dave Lake and I call it energy toning. Just doing enough of this on a regular basis to get your overall levels of arousal and anxiety to come down. But I say you can make overcoming anxiety your ultimate goal, but don't wait for perfection. There's times you will need to go ahead despite anxiety in order to live your values and achieve your goals. Don't wait for everything to be perfect before you move, or you're never going to move. I used to say, feel the fear and do it anyway. When I learned tapping, I then started saying, get rid of the fear before you go forward. Then I noticed that some people were never going forward because they wanted to have no fear at all. And so now I say, feel the fear, tap, and do it anyway. And then as you go, the tapping will actually make it easier and easier to move forward. Okay, so that's where this is now where we move into strategies for managing your emotional state. So here's my good mate, Dr. David Lake. I've shown this picture a number of times because I really like it, because you never see him looking like this. He's having a bit of a downer there. He's not really looking anxious. He's more looking depressed. But ultimately, the challenge for all of us is to learn to manage our emotions. And what happens when we're emotionally upset is that we don't tend to do things very well. We don't think very well. We don't make good decisions. We have trouble remembering things. And so it makes it very, very difficult for us to do the good stuff. Okay, so over the years, I've developed a model, and some of you have seen this model before. And in this program, I'm hoping to specifically give you some strategies in each of these 4 areas for anxiety relief and anxiety management, and ultimately for overcoming anxiety. So there's what you think and how you think. There's what you do with your body, what you put in your body, and how you use your body. There's what skills and behaviors you have learned to do. And there's the wonderful new energy techniques and energy psychology like tapping. And so, of course, I put that into a model. And once you put it into a diagram, then you have a model. So this is my model in a diagram. That just makes it look more squishy. And how are we going for time here? Okay, so in this program, what I want to do is to get into doing some coaching. And each time I want to spend about half an hour talking and about half an hour coaching. So I've just about spent enough time talking, but we need to go to the slides on tapping. Okay, so the tapping I'm starting with is set tapping, simple energy techniques. Now, this is also the tapping which we use in intention tapping. So we'll integrate the simple tapping approach of set in the intention tapping process. And for those of you who only know EFT, you'll see that the upper body points of EFT are the same points that we use in set. But also we use the finger points and the points on the thumb and points on the hand that we used in the original long version of EFT. There's a few differences, however, in terms of what we do with set and what people do with EFT. So in EFT, they use setup statements. You have to construct a statement about the problem that you're focusing on, and then you have to construct reminder statements every time you tap on these points, and then you tap on the points and the way that you focus on your problem is by repeating those statements. In set, we don't do that. We just simply focus on the problem, however you're aware of it, whether it's a thought, whether it's a feeling, whether it's an image, whatever it is, and then you just essentially tap while you're doing that, and then you move through the different aspects of the problem just simply using tapping. We use a process called continual tapping. So when we work with people, we have them tapping on these acupressure points the whole time. And we also use fingertip tapping, where you can use the thumb of the same hand to tap on the fingers of that hand. So hopefully you can see me here. I'm just tapping down on the side of each finger. Let the thumb be the tapper, and the thumb taps on the side of each finger. And this is fantastic for anxiety, because one of the things about anxiety is that, it often happens in public situations, and you're not going to go out into a public place and start tapping on your upper body points. Mostly you're not. But you can tap on the finger points, and I could be tapping on them right now like I am, and you wouldn't know that. I could be sitting in the boardroom about to do my presentation and tapping on the points like this under the table. Apart from tapping, you can also just gently put pressure on the points or gently rub the points, which is even less obtrusive and even more discreet and really, really good for public situations. So with set, we tap in any order on either side of the body. You focus on whatever you're aware of, whether it's your thoughts, whether it's your feelings, whether it's your body sensations. You can tap directly where you're focusing on the problems, or you can just tap, and if you get enough tapping happening, your anxiety and arousal will come down. So you don't even have to know what the problem is to do this tapping. You can just get tapping happening and bringing your anxiety and your stress down. We use a process we call mindful acceptance tapping, where you notice what's happening, you accept what's there, you allow it to be there, and then you follow it and just apply tapping to it. Ultimately, the more tapping you do, the better results you're likely to get. And if you tap every day, then you're going to bring down your overall anxiety and stress levels, and you're going to change your set point. So, for someone who's an anxiety sufferer, you may, you know, your anxiety may be a 3 or 4 or 5 out of 10 every day, all the time in the background. And if you bring that down so that it's, you know, a 1 or a 2 or a 0, or even to where you're actually feeling good and you're not feeling it on a regular basis, and you do that for long enough, you can change your set point so that your anxiety and stress levels overall are down and continue to stay down. And that's a fantastic, fantastic thing to have happen. So here's the time where I want to actually call for volunteers. Now, I did have some people that volunteered, but they were all people who already know this process and already have volunteered and done tapping with me. So I'm asking if there's someone here who's new, who has anxiety, who maybe isn't even familiar with the simple tapping. And what I'd like to do now is do a bit of coaching with you. And also I'm going to demonstrate the intention tapping process as well as we go. So first of all, just want to get you doing some simple tapping and show you some simple ways to use that, and hopefully send everybody on your way to do that. Now, if you can just type in the chat if you want to volunteer and you are a total newcomer. If you're not a total newcomer, but you definitely have an anxiety thing that you want to volunteer to work on, that will be okay, because of course I understand it's an anxiety program, and of course we have anxiety about volunteering. I always say in my workshops, if you have a fear of volunteering, we can treat that first. Obviously, if you don't know the tapping, you haven't been tapping, then you've got to kind of push through and you know, use courage to volunteer. But hopefully we will get a volunteer. Deb says, yes, have to agree with you, regular tapping so important. Sharon says, I think I believe that I might be able to get rid of anxiety, but now see it's about reducing the anxiety. No, actually, Sharon, this is about reducing intensity, but ultimately I believe your goal can be to overcome it completely. And that's what we're going for in this program. Along the way, one of the steps is going to be reducing the overall intensity and bringing your, because you get down to the point where you can start to manage. The more that you can start to manage, the more you can identify the triggers and the aspects to work on, the more you can improve things. So Deb is saying, happy to volunteer if no one else wants to. Well, it looks like you are it, Deb. So let's do this. Let me come back to the group, and then let me go to participants, and then I'm going to make you allowed to talk, promote to panelists. Okay. Oops, where are you? There you are. Now I think I have to, oh, there you are. Hello, Deb. And we'll unmute you. So, welcome.
Welcome.
Well, we've seen you before, but we haven't necessarily focused on anxiety as an issue. So,
No.
All right. So you know tapping, right?
I do.
Are you tapping?
And it was actually, I've had anxiety most of my life. You know, I come from a background of trauma and abuse.
Yes.
God love them. They didn't know any better. They didn't mean to harm me, but it harmed me.
Yes.
And then at the age of 19, I had a panic attack, and I had one nearly every day till I was 38.
Wow. Okay.
And,
now, start tapping right now, because you know the tapping. Okay. Now,
yeah.
for those of you who are watching who are totally new to this, when we do continual tapping, we essentially just have the person tapping on any of the points in any order, even while we're just talking about things. Because while you're doing that, your anxiety is already there in the background, and it's already activated to a certain extent. Now, you're actually talking about something which is a bit more severe than average, because you're talking about, you know, more along the lines of post-traumatic stress and that kind of thing, and also panic, not just an occasional panic attack, but you know, that would certainly qualify as panic disorder. Okay. However,
I've also got a very, I'm also in a very powerful spiritual practice I've been in for 41 years.
Good.
And for me, when I'm in that really high state, I had to learn. I've got a really beautiful Victorian country woman. She's a friend of mine. and I'm going to say the word shit, but
Yeah.
she really helped me with it. She said to me, Deborah, you have to learn how to sit in your shit and enjoy the smell.
Ah, okay. All right. Well,
And basically that's what I had to do with fear, the anxiety. I had to learn that because my instinctively,
as you do that, you actually take a nice deep breath, because not being able to go there and resisting and pushing away, and this is what anxiety makes us do, is that we just want to try and get rid of it, and the more we try to get rid of it, the more it comes. And so with tapping and even with exposure therapy and all that kind of stuff, it's facing it. But the problem is facing it without tapping is quite difficult, or facing it without support.
Yes, very.
And so you had support to help you to do that, and that's one thing. But let's just
about 18 months ago, I was having just out of nowhere, I had this full-blown anxiety panic attack, and nothing was touching it, and that's when I remembered the EFT, because I'd done it in the past, but then I hadn't kept on. So I googled anxiety panic attack EFT, and I got the beautiful Brad Yates.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And he's got this wonderful little.
At the moment, he's on the other side of the country.
I know.
They're all over there having fun, and I'm missing out, because Dave Lake, my mate, is getting together with him and Andy Bryce while we're here doing this program. Yeah. But anyway.
Well, he had this little 5 or 6 minute little YouTube video. He has 750 free ones.
Yeah.
And it was straight. He said, well, if you're here, we're not going to waste time talking, taking full responsibility for your own well-being. Yeah. And we just went through. And after 5 minutes, not only had the anxiety was completely at zero.
Yes.
I experienced this amazing sense of well-being. And
yeah. There's a lot of
many times since.
There are a lot of people who say, oh, tap along videos can do more harm than good. Well, actually, yeah, if you have trouble that you can't manage, then you should go and get some support. But actually, people like yourself, you can do that, and just following along and tapping with someone can be a very effective process. So everybody who's on the line right now, if you know tapping already, you should be tapping, okay? And for anyone who doesn't know tapping, of course, this is new and looks a little bit strange, but essentially we're just tapping on these acupressure points. And you did this point on the top of the head. I don't always use that when I first teach it to clients, because I feel like I should be doing this rubbing my tummy at the same time, and it's kind of the one which some people go, oh, that looks a bit silly. So I usually start with the eyebrow point. Start at the start of one eyebrow, and then the side of the eye, and then under the eye, top of the cheek, and then under the nose in the midline, and under the lip. And if you just follow along and you just tap on these points, underneath the collarbone, close into the center of the chest, under the arm, about, ladies, it's middle of the bra band, gents, it's level with the nipple on the side of the body. And then you can also tap on the side of these, the side of the thumb, side of the index finger, side of the middle finger, side of the ring finger, which we incorporate, side of the little finger, and the bottom of the hand, which you started tapping on. And once you know those, and you can also tap on the wrists like this, and all of those points are in the diagram. They're on our website as well, and we'll send the links out for people so that you can have them. Once you know them, you can do what Deb's doing, and as she's doing that, you can just see her starting to breathe more easily and all that kind of stuff just happening naturally, right? Which is the same thing that happened when you just watched that video with Brad and you just tapped along. The tapping started to help you to relax. Okay, so with simple energy techniques, instead of having to say words or do setups, we just tap through sequences like this, and then we can do it in two ways. We can focus on a problem, or we can just tap and have the relaxation benefits of doing some tapping and bringing down your overall arousal. There's a place for both of them. Like I said, if you tap enough, you bring down your set point, and ultimately things don't trigger you like they did before. And a lot of your problems will go away without even having to be dealt with directly. when you work directly, you're focusing in on all the aspects of that problem so that you can treat that, so those aspects don't trigger you or upset you anymore. Okay? So let me just go through a couple of things about how to use this. And maybe we need you to do, you know, to focus in on things that might trigger anxiety to see, you know, so that we can get a before and after result. Do you have something which is causing you anxiety or that might cause anxiety coming up?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Just a little tentatively.
I'm in this other group with this man from Perth, and
Okay, you're talking about homework, doing homework for a group that you're in with me. Okay. Yeah.
and I get very anxious when I have to share, be vulnerable in front of other people.
Well, here you are doing that right now.
Yeah, but I can't see them. I can only see you.
Okay. So if you think about doing it in the group where you can see everybody and they can see you, that there's something about that that brings up the anxiety.
Yeah.
Okay.
I you know, I have a lot of my anxiety is around being seen.
Okay. All right. So there's two ways to do this. One is that you can think about being seen, and that will activate, you know, whatever feelings that it triggers in your body. You can imagine yourself in the situation where you're being seen and have that happen. Or if you already have the feelings, you can just focus on the feelings and just tap. So when you think about being seen, what happens?
Oh no, it's scary.
Okay.
Like that's one of the I've had my website for my business as a counselor for 8 years.
Yeah.
And I think that I've probably in 8 years, if no exaggeration, I've probably made about $5,000 in 8 years in my business.
Okay. All right.
Which is wonderful.
So this is triggering a
because I spent more time playing with the website than actually getting on with the work.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sure this is.
I'm a fraud. They might say I'm a fraud. You know, how can I do this work whenever I know I'm only just beginning to realize?
Yeah. Okay.
This whole concept of that you've got this anxiety, but it doesn't stop you. I mean, you're such an inspiration.
Well, hey, it has stopped me in the past, and it has stopped me, you know, doing a whole bunch of things. And it's been a continual process to learning how to, you know, go through it, resolve it, you know, release it, etc. And I must say, this is why I'm doing this now. The discovery of the intention tapping has actually taken it to another level. When I learned tapping, that really helped. Okay, so tapping itself really helped. And, you know, again, people like, we're just talking about stuff and she's just tapping along. And, you know, and a moment ago, you started to focus in on issues. And when you did, you activated some of your negative thinking and your negative feelings, and the anxiety came up in your body. And of course, we can, with tapping, we can zero in on some of that and we can release it. But with the intention tapping, I found that I was able to slice through much more quickly and get relief on stuff that was blocking me much more effectively. And that's really why I'm doing
Let's do that.
What's that?
Let's do that. Do it.
Well, first things first. So first of all, just the simple tapping and just keep on doing it, right? And then, you know, let me just go through a couple of ways of focusing in on issues, right? So you have the thought, what was it? Being seen?
Yeah, like especially like in my website, like, you know, when a client rings me and books, I get anxious.
Okay, so
but I still see them, I still do it. But if they call and they cancel, I feel this incredible sense.
I've been there. Okay, so let's just focus on. You've brought up several different things. The overarching thing is being seen. but there are different things that trigger that. So one of them is being contacted by a client. Another one of them is being in a group situation where other people are seeing you. Okay. Another one is actually having your website, promote you or do whatever it does. And so when we're tapping, of course, all of these different things are coming in your mind at the moment. And believe it or not, you can just tap and just allow them all to go through your mind just as they do. In EFT, you've got to slice off one and you've got to do it to death until it's fixed. Well, we just follow that because we think things are all connected emotionally. And so we're just going to follow the threads as they come up, and we just keep applying tapping to them. And if you think about being seen, what happens in your body?
Oh, I can feel I can feel the fear. I didn't. It's funny how you disassociate from your body when you have anxiety. But although it's in your body, you kind of, your head tries to disassociate you. So hence, lots of television, lots of reading, lots of eating, whatever.
Okay. So.
But when I try to go in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Somebody said to me, try and go into your body every day for 3 minutes. And I tried it the other day, just to go right in my body and stay there.
Yeah.
And that's when it was like this low hum through my whole system of this anxiousness.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that you do that very process and just add the tapping to it. And when you add the tapping to it, don't try and make the feeling go away.
Yeah. No.
Don't try and make the feeling do anything. Just add the tapping to it. Okay? So this is one process that we use. We call it grafting the tapping to the problem. Okay? And so you can just add the tapping to whenever the problem occurs. But in this case, you've just got a low underlying hum of anxiety all the time. And then there are some things that make it spike and trigger and activate and all that kind of stuff. Okay? So just try this process on that, whatever is happening in your body, and just paying attention, just noticing what it does, just add the tapping, and then it will start to do something. Just notice what happens.
Well, I've actually been diagnosed at the moment. See, I can't get this arm up any higher than this at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be a rotator cuff injury.
Uh-huh.
But as I'm tuning into this hum of anxiety and tapping, I'm getting these sharp spikes of pain in my shoulder.
Okay, so, and if that's actually, if that's too intense, then maybe that's telling you that there's something that needs to be physically adjusted or whatever. But if it's manageable, just do it.
I know it's manageable.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as I stop to tell you about it, it all just stopped.
Okay. All right. So my guess is, I've not seen the tapping do anything but beneficial stuff on this. And I don't know whether the rotator cuff has anything to do with this issue. I just know that if you keep adding the tapping to it, that it might actually help. So let's see what happens. And again, you'll notice as you're doing this, every now and then you take a nice deep breath, because ultimately the anxiety has got a constriction, there's a contraction happening. And when you get the tapping and just add that into the process, and you just mindfully notice what's happening in your body, and put your attention on the anxiety symptoms, ultimately it starts to move, because emotions are meant to move. When you have anxiety, they're stuck. In fact, I see anxiety as usually kind of a swirling energy or something like that, and just can't move out. And so,
and what I noticed when I sat there for that 3 minutes in my body, not only could I feel the energy in my body, it was like I could feel like a swirling energy around my brain.
Okay. So I just think for you, the first thing is just to add the tapping to that. Okay?
Yeah.
And I reckon if you do that on a daily basis, I would be curious to get some feedback from you next week when we get back together, if you do nothing more than just add tapping to that process. Okay? Now, of course, we're going to talk about how to apply the intention tapping to that. But today I just want to get everybody on the same page with the simple tapping process that we use. And this is what we call acceptance tapping. The problem with some things like anxiety is that we don't accept them, we want to get rid of them. And so what the research shows is the more you try and resist something, the more it persists. So in this case, you're actually allowing it to be there, but you're just adding tapping to its presence. And instead of trying to make the tapping make it do something, you're just allowing it to process however it does. And what you'll find is that it will progressively move and move through you, and you'll actually find that in 99% of cases, people feel more relaxed, they start breathing more like you are. And if you start breathing more freely, lo and behold, you start thinking more clearly, and you don't have the same level of anxiety in your system. I'm just looking, oh my God, an hour is such a short time. So we're going to have to pause here, Deb. But, that process may seem like not much. But I'll be very surprised if you do that a few times each day in the next week if you don't notice something really, really good. Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Now, how do we do this? I have to, unfortunately, make you, not remove you, change to attendee. Okay. All right. Now you're back with the great unwashed, okay? And we'll love to hear from you some feedback about how that goes with applying that. All right. So, okay, so here we are. So wow, it's already coming up to our hour. I think I mentioned when I put this out there that we might have an extra few minutes, and so if you want to hang around for a little bit more, please do, because I do have a couple of other things that I want to share with you. Okay, so this process of acceptance tapping is a really, really helpful process, with anxiety and with all kinds of problems, actually. So we graft the tapping to the problem pattern, to the behavior of the problem, to the feeling reactions of the problem, whatever there is. You tap and you basically let your mind wander freely through the issues. Let the negative thoughts be there, let the feelings be there, focus in on the feelings, thoughts, memories, ideas, whatever flows through. Simply allow it to be there and add the tapping to it. And then just accept and allow whatever happens next. Sometimes you'll notice that the feelings will actually get stronger. If you keep on tapping and you continue through this process, you're going to end up somewhere good. Now, if you get too scared by that because the anxiety is too intense, that might be an indication that you need to do this with somebody else, because you can't always do everything on your own. But if you actually are willing to keep on going through this, when feelings intensify, if you just keep on doing the tapping and you don't try and make the feelings go away and you just accept and allow them to flow through, even though they get quite intense, they will actually change and they will shift, and ultimately they will subside. It's the resistance to them that causes them to get worse, and so allowing them to process through, accepting and allowing, is a really, really powerful process for changing things. Let me give you just some very, very quick tapping tips to take away for anxiety. This is just using simple tapping. Number one, tap for first aid. When you feel anxious, do the tapping. You can use the finger tapping if it's somewhere out in public. If you can't do it in the situation, do it afterwards as soon as you can. Graft the tapping to the problem. Use the fingertip tapping like I've mentioned. Then if you want to do some focused work, do some tapping on whatever triggers your anxiety. Focus on those triggers and just apply the tapping to them, and then just follow what happens next. Ultimately, if you're going to get over some of this stuff, like Deb mentioned, there's a lot of past events that are triggering this issue. And when you're dealing with big T trauma like this is something that's good to work with someone else. But a lot of us have past events where we learned to feel anxious, like, for example, when we were at school and we got humiliated in front of the class or stuff like this. This can lead to a public speaking anxiety or a social anxiety in current life. And so ultimately, going back over those past events and applying tapping to them can be very effective. If you tap every day between now and next week, and you do, ultimately, if you were one of my clients, I would say for the first week or two, I want you to try and get an hour of tapping into every day. You can tap while you're walking, you can tap while you're watching TV, you can tap like this while you're on the train heading to work or on the bus. You know, you can certainly do it in the car as long as you are not focusing on issues and you are keeping your focus on the road and stuff like that. My wife does the tapping every time she gets to a red traffic light. Just get some tapping into your day and try and link it to your current routines. Do some preventative tapping on the things that you think might be happening in future. And as I mentioned, tap after the situation on what happened so that you can feel better. And we are going to come to the end of our time. Let me just check. I did say 60 minutes these sessions would be, did I not? I just don't want to shortchange you because I'm happy to hang around a little bit longer if anybody wants to do that. I just want to make 100% sure. If someone would quickly type in the chat, yes, I did say 60 minutes. So I know that some of you will have planned to go, so I don't want to go over by 15 or 20 minutes if that's the commitment that we've made. But I will usually go over a few minutes each time. I just can't help myself. And we did start a couple of minutes late today. So look, next week, we're going to get into the intention tapping and how you can take that simple process of tapping and you can apply some specific intentions to release things that are hooking you and that are triggering you, and release those emotional attachments and free you up to not have to react in those ways. Restore the body energy flow. Get yourself out into a state of calm and clarity, and also access your resources of confidence and courage and all the things that you might need. Elise is saying, I'm wondering how to use tapping if you have only seconds of anxiety before going into an unconscious state. Well, first of all, give me a little bit more detail about what you mean by an unconscious state. So in other words, you don't get much warning and then you are triggered into a big reaction. Is that what's happening? Okay, seconds of anxiety before going into an unconscious state seizure. Okay, in that case, I would be doing it, first of all, I would be doing it on the fact that might happen, because that anticipatory anxiety would be quite high. So I'd be actually just, before any anxiety happened at all, I'd be doing lots of tapping to bring the general anxiety levels down, so that, I think that could be beneficial. Number two, I would be anticipating and imagining, when things come up, and I'll be doing tapping ahead of time for that to see if I can actually reduce the frequency or, now I don't know what type of seizures exactly that you're talking about here. I do know that there has been some research on people with epileptic seizures using tapping, where they've been able to reduce the frequency and the severity of seizures by using tapping. So I'd be using it preventatively ahead of time. I certainly would be using it the very first time I would be noticing the anxiety and starting to do it straight away. Also, the more you do this, the more you actually become more aware of the subtle signs of anxiety that are probably there even before, those last few seconds. And I certainly would be doing it afterwards on my reactions. And I might also be doing it retrospectively, looking back on past seizures and things that have happened to me in the past. So yeah, you're not feeling anxious until it surfaces. Yes, definitely daily tapping to bring it down, and all those other things I would recommend trying those as well. Alrighty, so daily tapping for everyone. Mindful acceptance tapping. If you can, see if you can just notice the anxiety and just allow it to do what it does instead of trying to oppose it, and then just add tapping to its presence. That acceptance as a process can be very, very powerful. Even without tapping, there's a lot of evidence that accepting negative thoughts and feelings without having to act on them or believe them, rather than trying to push them away, can be a very, very powerful thing. And tapping can make it easier to allow them to be there, and also can reduce the intensity of our reaction to them. So thanks very much for joining me. I appreciate you being willing to be live. those of you who are catching this on a replay, hopefully you'll watch this in time and have a bit of time to practice some tapping before next week. And I look forward to introducing you more to the intention tapping when we get back together in 1 week's time. Ciao for now. Okay, thank you.